People ask all the time, how long does a real estate transaction in Hawaii take? The answer is, it depends, and we'll talk about it coming up next. Yeah, hello friends, Nonaka here with the Buy Big Island video blog, and this week we're going to talk about how long a real estate transaction takes in Hawaii. And we get asked this all the time, so people can kind of plan their timelines and figure out how much time they need to make the transition or to move out of their home. And the short answer is, it's negotiable, right? Everything in a contract is negotiable. So your closing timeline can be determined on what the buyer and the seller agree upon in terms of how much time either side needs. There are kind of standard minimums. So that pretty much depends on your financing. So if you are doing a cash transaction, you can do, minimum a 2-week. Usually it's more like a 30-day close for a cash transaction where you don't need any type of loan or financing. But if you're doing a loan, you're almost going to need a minimum of 30 days. Usually it's closer to 45 or 60. And so that's kind of going to depend on your lender and then what stage of the lending process you're in. So if you have all of your documentation in, they have all of your information, and all we got to do is order the appraisal and get that process through underwriting, it can be quicker. But the important thing to understand here is it really depends on the market also, because in a very busy market, things are going to be slower because all of the different services that relate to the real estate transaction process can be busy also. And that's really what we're facing right now. So as we're shooting this video, it's a very busy market. We're talking about 50-60% increases in the number of homes that are selling versus how many normally sell on average. And so when that happens, even though there's more transactions, you don't get more escrow people and more appraisers and more home inspectors and more termite inspectors. So there are a lot of different parties involved in getting a real estate transaction closed. And just to name a few, I just rattled off a few, but there's also attorneys that draft deeds. There are your realtor has to do their part, right, and make sure that they're moving the process along. There are surveyors that have to go out there and survey and stake property. So there's a lot of different things that got to happen in addition to just the buyer and seller doing their job and making sure that they are performing and doing all of the things that they need to do to get the process through and going. So there's a lot of different factors. A lot of them sometimes are out of your control. If the house needs to get tented for termites and the termite companies are all booked out 2 months in advance, that can cause a delay in closing if you have to get that property tented prior to closing. If you need to get a survey done and the surveyors are booked 30 days out, that could slow down that process to get a survey done. So there's a lot of different factors, and sometimes they're within your control and sometimes there's not. So no matter what your contract says, you really have to prepare for these contingencies to pop up during the process, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. And there is a automatic right to extend built into our contract. So that's a negotiable date. Usually it's between 7 and 14 days, but if either party, the buyer or the seller, need additional time, it's the only thing really in the contract that you can unilaterally exercise. So just one party needs to sign it, and then you can add on another 7 to 14 days depending on what you put into that paragraph in the contract. So the contract has some flexibility built into it, so you have that process, because sometimes the moving people can't come and the seller can't get out in time. There's a lot that needs to happen prior to you actually closing. And so the biggest takeaway from all of this is always just be flexible. The real estate sales process, no matter what side you're on, can be a stressful process, and people can get upset and frustrated at the process. But the reality is, sometimes it's out of your control. It's nobody's fault. It happens. Many transactions don't close on time. And so it's just important when you're doing your planning to have some flexibility built in, and sometimes you just got to go with the flow. And at the end of the day, we get those deals closed, but sometimes there may be a few day delay, a week delay. There's lots of different things that can get involved depending on a multitude of different things, right? So if you have any questions, you can always reach out, but just don't plan hard and fast on, I need this to happen on this day, because if you have your mindset set around that, you're likely going to be set up for disappointment, especially in a busy market like we're seeing right now. So be flexible, be Gumby, and you'll get there, but don't cause yourself undue stress if you don't have to. So it's hard to say exactly how long a real estate transaction takes, but we try and shoot for our best and meet the contractual deadlines. Everybody wants to do that, but sometimes it's not possible. So if you have any questions, as always, you can put them in the comments below or shoot me an email at dylan@buybigisland.com, and I will get back to you. Have a good week. Aloha.